basically there's no toilet paper in America, at least none that I'm aware of, and I'm 99% confident that this is the case, that is, made entirely from American pulp. There's always importing either from Canada or from South America.
You're listening to the Digest This podcast, and I'm your host, Bethany Cameron. Today's taboo topic involves wiping our butts. I'm just gonna say it to get it out of the way, but it's something we all do, and for many, we do it at least once a day. And if you're female, we are wiping more than just our rear ends. That's why I invited Lee, the co-founder and CEO of Plant Paper. I recently switched over to a non-toxic toilet paper and fell in love with it, so I had to personally invite him on the show to talk all about the negative effects conventional toilet paper has on the human body. You may be listening and asking, well, what's wrong with toilet paper, Bethany? But what many fail to realize is that several on the market contain formaldehyde, bleach, PEG-40, and forever chemicals. These ingredients in toilet paper are touching our most sensitive areas regularly on the daily, causing health issues we may not realize until years later. In this interview, we talk about bidets and some personal experiences we've had with them and why they may not be for everyone, the environmental aspect of tree-based toilet paper, and how toilet paper is actually made and all the steps it takes to make a roll. After this episode, you'll think twice about your tush. Let's talk about colostrum for a second. It's everywhere. I mean, everyone is talking about it, and let's face it, everyone is promoting it, and it can be quite confusing which brand is truly the best because not all colostrum is created equal with good farm practice morals. I first started taking Armor colostrum about 4 years ago before anyone knew about them and before any other company jumped on the bandwagon. Sadly, when something becomes a hot topic, many other brands quickly bust out the same thing, but with less quality and sell it at a cheap price just to be a part of the trend. So you end up getting a lesser product and little to no results. Don't be fooled by others. Armor colostrum uses a cold chain biopotent technology that distills over 200 functional nutrients, guaranteeing the highest bioactive integrity and bioavailability. Another great thing about Armor is that they only extract and use the surplus colostrum from USA grass-fed, pasture-raised happy cows that are no longer needing it to supply their young. So you know you're not taking it away from animals that need it. Only the surplus colostrum is used. Armor has 3 flavors, orange, watermelon, and unflavored, which is my personal favorite. It has no flavorings and just one single ingredient. It tastes like creamy milk, yet it's suitable for those with dairy sensitivities because it contains no casein, which is the protein most people with a dairy allergy react to. And Armor has many dairy-sensitive customers. And we worked out a special offer for my audience. You can receive 30% off your first subscription order. Just go to armor.com/digest or enter code DIGEST at checkout to get 30% off your first subscription order. That's armra.com/digest. Okay, Lee, so you are the co-founder and CEO of Plant Paper, and I think this is a taboo topic that a lot of people may not want to talk about, and that's wiping your tushy. And I will admit that I switched to non-toxic toilet paper, yours in particularly, not too far along. And the reason was, first of all, I knew that there were chemicals in conventional toilet paper, but also I was really tired of my butt looking like a snow globe after I wiped it every time. Why don't you, before you even introduce yourself, I have 3 questions and you can only answer yes or no.
Yeah.
Ready? Okay.
Yeah.
First question, yes or no. Does conventional toilet paper contribute to hemorrhoids?
Yes.
Or more so, could it exacerbate them if you already have them?
It definitely could.
Yeah. Okay. And is there formaldehyde in the leading brand of toilet paper?
I cannot answer that definitively.
Okay. Well, I want to get into the formaldehyde and the fluoride and the bleach and all the things that are really not disclosed in toilet paper. Well, before we do that, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell my listeners who you are and what you do.
Sure. Well, my name is Lee Reitelman, and as you mentioned, I'm one of the founders of Plant Paper, and I'm really happy to be here and appreciate the opportunity to chat. Um, yeah, I think you've touched on a lot of different things that I spend a lot of my time day to day thinking about, the sort of health dimensions of toilet paper, the health impacts, environmental impacts of toilet paper, and then the sort of experiential and performance characteristics of toilet paper, and how and I think you also touched on the fact that it is a taboo topic, and that a lot of people, it's something that most people, at least historically, have not spent a lot of time thinking about, and even less time talking about. And I do think that that's a big part of why toilet paper, as we know it, as most of us know it, really hasn't changed a lot over the decades. In certain respects, to give some credit where it's due, the big toilet paper producers have made certain improvements to their process that have made it, less environmentally destructive, and less of a health risk than it once was. But by and large, the product hasn't really changed. It's still made with largely virgin trees, from forests that are, really critical to counteracting climate change, and it's still bleached. And it's still made, really with one parameter or one goal in mind, which is softness in your hand. I think that most people, and it's done that way for a reason. The reason being that most of us judge toilet paper by how it feels when you touch it in your hand. And the toilet paper companies sort of know that. They also know that the bigger a roll looks, the better a value it seems like you're getting. And so that also contributes to the way that it's manufactured. They blow hot air into the toilet paper to make it look bigger, even without increasing the amount of raw materials that they use in it. But what you end up with is a toilet paper that, leaves what we call fluff bunnies, behind, and B, just doesn't actually work all that well. When you're so focused on softness in the hand, you don't necessarily, the trade-off is that you don't end up with a product that is as strong or as good at doing the one job that it's supposed to do, which is, keeping you clean.
Yeah, well, and I think too that there's lotion being added to a lot of conventional toilet paper. Some they don't, but there are some that they add lotion and they even promote it. They're like, it's marketed as lotion and all that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, again, I think that most people, it didn't occur or still hasn't occurred to most people that, you use toilet paper. It's a pretty unique product. You're using it, several times a day, every single day, for the rest of your life, for the entirety of your lifespan. Unless you've switched to a bit day or you're from a part of the world where you don't do that. But most of us here in the US don't fall into those two categories. So, yeah, most people just don't think about, not only are you using it with, tremendous frequency, but you're using it on a part of your body that is particularly sensitive, particularly vulnerable, particularly prone to all sorts of issues, inflammation, infection, and so on.
Well, yeah, and like you said, you mentioned it's a very vulnerable and sensitive area where
Yeah,
it's probably more susceptible and prone to getting infections if you are, because it is a sensitive area. Just like if I have a lot of female listeners, I mean, we talk about non-toxic female disposables, period pads and things like that, and it's pretty much the same issue here. And myself, I can attest that, IBS, we are using toilet paper a lot. So it's very important because, yeah, this is a repetitive use.
Definitely, definitely. That's I think in general, one of the themes of that's emerged from a lot of our research, and we've done a lot of it over the years, is that it really is about with certain chemicals, not all chemicals, but certain chemicals that tend to stick around for a long time, based on the way that the chemical bonds that are make the molecules what they are. They don't break down, and so or they don't break down on a short time span. And so it really is about repeated exposure. There's certain types of things where a small amount of exposure, is okay because the levels will naturally sort of decrease and reset. But with some chemicals, that's not the case, and those are chemicals that have appeared in toilet paper, that toilet paper is tested positive for. So I think that's where that repeated use, the daily exposure, even at a really low level, becomes something that we have to be conscious of.
Yeah, well, okay, so here's an interesting thing. When I go to the Charmin website, they quote, air quote, list the ingredients, and they say it's wood pulp and water. And then they say it's a water-based adhesive. And then they say conditioners. Well, what are the water-based adhesives and what are the conditioners? They don't go into detail about that.
Right.
And why is it so hard to find the ingredients in toilet paper? Because it seems like it's not like food, it's required to list the ingredients. How come it's not required in toilet paper?
That's a great question. I mean, we have been lobbying a couple of different sort of consumer advocacy groups, EWG, Environmental Working Group, for one, and a number of others, to sort of try to make the case that more transparency is needed for this particular product. I mean, I think that these things take time to kind of change public opinion or change consumers' expectations. And obviously, the consumer's desires are the thing that ultimately like move the needle. If enough people are asking for a thing, eventually, there's enough pressure that the industry will do it. But it takes a lot of, and in order for the consumer to ask for it, the first thing they have to do is know that there's a reason to ask for it. And I think you see that, with cosmetic products. Obviously, at this point, there's been so much consumer education that's happened over the last couple of decades, that people are saying, "Hey, like I'm not going to buy this thing unless I know what's in it. I need to be able to scan." Obviously, there's a lot of great apps that do this for you now, where you can say, "Hey, I want to know what's in this, and I want to know if this is a safe choice. This particular sunscreen, this particular lip balm, or whatever it might be." And toilet paper is just a little late to the party, but it's getting there. I think, again, there's something about the taboo quality, the sort of unmentionable aspect of wiping your butt, that I think has meant that it's taken a little longer, but we're getting there. I will say, in my sort of hopefully this doesn't come across as too conspiratorial, but I think that the paper industry is a very, very big industry. And it's like rather well consolidated under, a couple of different like mega corporations. And I mean, that's true in its way of cosmetic products as well. But I think that there's a lot of kind of institutional inertia, and kind of political inertia that's meant that paper just hasn't been subject to some of the same scrutiny.
Oh, it's all political. Like I'll go down that rabbit hole because I think there's like maybe 12 major brands that own like food, cosmetics, toiletries. I don't know who owns Charmin. Is it Clorox?
Charmin
Or
is Procter and Gamble.
okay, okay. Um, but yeah, like there's those big brands, and I mean, we have the ingredients in our food, in our cosmetics. We know what our clothes are made of. It lists the materials. Like, why not the toilet paper? And from my research, and it's again really hard to pinpoint which company is using what, but formaldehyde has been noted to be used, bleach, even fluoride, citric acid, sodium benzoate, PEG 40, like all of these things. How come they can't disclose it? Because no brand is really sharing.
Right. And I think, we've had lots of plant paper customers tell us that they've reached out to these companies to say, hey, can you just tell me what's in it? And even with a sort of personal request, they're not making that information available, nor are they making available any of the testing that they do. One of the kind of cornerstones of um, uh, our business, our ethos, is that we try to be as transparent as we possibly can be. Like if somebody asks for a test and we haven't done it before, we'll try it. We'll do it. I mean, provided that it seems like remotely plausible that that thing could end up in toilet paper, we'll test for it and we'll share those tests and we'll share those with anybody who asks. You don't even have to be a customer. So I think that's just not the way the big companies have done things. Whether or not it's because they know that those tests won't reflect well on them, or they claim that there's like sort of secret sauce, and they can't disclose all the information. But it's like, hey, I mean, all these other companies are required, all food companies, cosmetic companies are required to do that. And if you don't have anything to hide, then why not?
Exactly. It's the infamous what's it called? Proprietary ingredients, that they always go back
Exactly.
to. Well, and I think it's interesting because, of course, I like went down that rabbit hole about why formaldehyde is even used in toilet paper, and they claim it's to help strengthen the paper.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think that one of the things that as we've like pushed on the some of the toilet paper companies, they've now said, well, we now use some. It's an aldehyde. I think it's called an aldehyde, but not a formaldehyde. So it's a sort of it's a kind of resin that does something very similar to formaldehyde, but they claim that it doesn't have the same, people don't have the same sensitivities to it. And yet, there are studies that indicate that people are having those sensitivities, even in the period since they claim to have phased out formaldehyde, which was, according to them, some decades ago. So you don't really know what you're getting. And I do think that this is another kind of theme or trend that we've seen, is that um, it's a bit of a game of whack-a-mole. Like consumers or consumer advocacy groups will bring forward a concern about a certain chemical, and then the chemical companies will turn around and they'll change, like one atom, in a compound, and say, well, now it's not the same thing. You see this particularly with PFAS, where PFAS is basically a fluorine and carbon bond that's really, really strong. And as far as we know, any chemical that has that bond is going to basically do all the bad things that PFAS chemicals are known to do. But now, again, because there's more scrutiny, some of these big companies are like adding a few other things that in theory make it a different chemical, but it's really not. And you see that with a lot of chemicals.
I've seen that. Yeah, I'm noticing that too, is where they're just changing one chemical compound. So it's technically not, but it's still the same. Like, give an example of just for food, just for simplicity's sake, gums, a lot of companies are removing guar gum or xanthan gum. And they're like, oh, it's guar gum and xanthan gum free. Well, they're adding hickory root fiber or acacia fiber, where it's essentially the same thing.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah, and I think there's some understandably these companies have a sort of business prerogative to try to keep the quality level the same or the performance characteristics the same. We get it, but I think that it is ultimately I think it's partly a matter of, with a lot of these practices, the negative impacts don't become apparent right away, right? They take years or decades to show up. And like generally the way big business operates is it's not really looking down the road, you know, 20 or 30 years or even 10 years. It's more like we've got to hit these certain margin requirements, growth requirements, and so forth. And so, they'll take these sort of shortcuts to appease whatever the issue of the day is, without really answering the fundamental the fundamental question, which is like, is this a product that I can trust? Is it truly safe to use for my whole lifetime?
Yeah, Lee, you bring up a really good point, is that it does not, it's not very evident until many years later that it's accumulating. And I can see this in many different areas. It's not like you're putting on a lotion and you automatically get a reaction, or you eat a food and you get bloated. You'll definitely know it's that food or that skin lotion or something, right? Like this, you probably won't know it until many years later.
Definitely, definitely true.
And then, in case anyone doesn't know, I have seen formaldehyde. It's obviously classified as a carcinogen, and it has been linked to hormonal disruptions. It's obviously an irritant, so that's just one ingredient that they're using, among others, which I want to get into. But I also want to know: can we just take a step back, like? What got you into this industry to begin with? Like, did you just wake up one day and like, I'm just going to start a non-toxic toilet paper company?
Well, no. I think first of all, to give a little bit of background, Scott and Diva, two of the three other founders, were working in the food space before, as was I, and we all worked on a number of different businesses that were food based, and I think, in our own ways, each of us was convinced that when it came to food, um, making products in a more sustainable way, a more responsible way, whether in tune with sort of seasonality or what the local bounty is, or doing things organically. The strong feeling was that making those types of choices did not need to mean a trade-off in quality for the consumer. That actually doing things the right way, the better way, the more sustainable way, the more local way, actually could mean a trade-up and not a trade-off. And I think what we so that was the kind of thesis behind all of our work prior to Plant Paper. It was in 2016 that we became aware that toilet paper, as we knew it, was from an environmental perspective, a disaster. That most of the toilet paper in America was made with virgin trees, and that those trees, despite what the toilet paper industry will tell you, those forests are really not replaceable. They talk about managed forest and they talk about tree replanting campaigns and so forth, but the reality is that it takes a tremendous environmental toll. And it was really the environmental thing that caught our attention first. And then the more we dug, the more we realized that environmental, the health of the planet and the health of the people on it, and all the beings on it, are really two sides of the same coin. They're really inseparable. And so we dug deeper into the way toilet paper was made, the processing, the chemicals used. A lot of scary research around the prevalence of cancer in areas close to pulp mills. It's really well documented, and other issues, sort of ecological issues in wildlife populations near pulp mills. So all of this just got us thinking, wow, nobody knows any of this. We all think of toilet paper as just this kind of innocuous, forgettable thing that's in the bathroom. That's what drew us in. And then as we did more research, we came to believe that there was a way to make toilet paper better, from an environmental standpoint and from a human health standpoint, without sacrificing quality, without being a trade-off, but actually being a trade-up, and applying like a really rigorous and sort of like passionate engagement with the product that we felt was kind of missing from big toilet paper's approach, which has kind of been, in many ways resting on its laurels for decades. And we felt we could do something great. And then, to I think what really sealed the deal for us was feeling like from a marketing standpoint, from a kind of brand positioning standpoint, nobody had ever, I don't know, taken this product seriously. Nobody had endeavored to communicate about it in a detailed, serious adult way to the consumer. And I don't mean that just sort of superficially. I mean, we were excited about the opportunity to kind of bring this thing out in the open, and get people talking about something that previously had been, well, even today, is basically taboo. And that just felt like a really cool opportunity. So that's really what I think got all of us excited. Like, first of all, feeling like, hey, we don't want to use conventional toilet paper, the types of toilet paper you could buy on the grocery store shelves anymore ourselves. We were having our first child at that time, and just feeling like, hey, like, this is crazy to be using this sort of thing every day. We know we can do better. And secondly, hey, this is a really cool storytelling opportunity that we can bring a lot of other people in on.
Yeah. Well, is that why you chose bamboo over trees, is because of the forest situation?
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's two parts of it. One is that from a sustainability standpoint, bamboo is just exceptional. It's the fastest growing plant. It can grow up to a meter a day. Once it gets going, it takes only a couple of years, 2 or 3 years to reach maturity, which is to say, to reach the point where you can be cutting it more than once a year and have it grow back to full size. It stores a lot of its carbon underground. So even when you cut it, you're not like releasing all that carbon. You're not killing the bamboo as you do with trees. You cut down the species of trees that are used in Canada, and they're gone, they're dead. Bamboo, you don't kill it. It's like more like mowing the lawn. So first, it's just incredibly sustainable. Second of all, from a kind of paper or materials science standpoint, it kind of just sets up perfectly for producing a soft, strong paper product. With trees, you have to blend a couple of different species, hardwoods, or a couple of different categories of wood, hardwood and softwood, in order to achieve the desired performance profile. For the strength and the softness, you need two different types of trees. With bamboo, you kind of have this perfect hybrid fiber structure. And so when we kind of got hip to that, we were like, wow, this is really, if we're going to be making toilet paper, and obviously the world needs toilet paper, it should be made with something like bamboo.
Hmm. What's your opinion on bidets?
I think they're great. I love bidets. I think it would be a great thing if more people use them. I think our feeling, and obviously there are a couple of companies that make great ones, and companies that are trying to sort of popularize them and make them more successful, and we totally support that and applaud that. I think our feeling is that for a lot of people, it's just not going to happen soon enough.
Hey guys, I want to give every one of you a gift, so listen up. Many of you know that I created my own digestive support protein powder designed to aid in gut health and specifically formulated for those with sensitive tummies. I created this back in 2018, and since then, it's helped thousands of you with digestive issues and given relief. All that positive feedback has encouraged me to expand the Bethany's Pantry line with 3 different flavors, a protein bake, and L-glutamine powder to help heal and seal the gut lining. So as a thank you for being a podcast listener, I want to give you $10 off anything from my digestive support line. You can use this $10 discount on any flavor of protein, protein bake, or digestive aid such as L-glutamine. The one-time code podcast10 will give you $10 off. Whether you're a regular consumer or have never tried but wanted to, Anyone can use this code one time as a gift from me. Oh, and a little side note, because we source our pea protein from Europe, I can assure you it's not sprayed with glyphosate because it's actually illegal in Europe to spray pea crops with such chemicals. Europe's standards and regulations on growing crops are far superior than American standards, and that's why I am proud to use such a source for my clean, easy to digest, lectin-free protein powder. Go to Bethany'sPantry.com, which is our new website, and use the code podcast10 for $10 off anything. Again, Bethany'sPantry.com, and then go and use the podcast 10 code and you'll get $10 off. I'm laughing and I'm raising my hand because we actually got a bidet. This was like a year ago. And my husband, he installed it and I couldn't do it. Like for some people, it may just not be for them, but I didn't feel clean afterwards. I was like, the pressure is not the pressure that I need to feel clean.
Actually remove the thing that needs to be removed. Yeah,
exactly. I was just like, I'm just making myself wet. And I felt like it was creating more of a mess than it was helping the situation. I was like, and so we ended up just getting rid of it because I was like, this is not for us.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I hear that a lot. I remember the first time I ever tried to use a bidet. It was at my wife's parents' house, and they had like an old school one that's like a separate one that sits next to the toilet, like the way they used to see them in like hotel rooms in Europe. I haven't seen one in a long time now, but I attempted to use this and just like absolutely scalded my ass and all adjacent parts, and got the bathroom like completely soaked. I mean, obviously, those are solvable problems, but I think that it's not so easy as just like everybody get a bidet. The reality is like, in 130 million American households, like what percentage of them realistically are going to switch to bidets in the next 10 years? It's a very, very small number. And in the meantime, we're cutting down, like, millions of acres of forests to wipe our butts, and using, millions of gallons of bleach and other chemicals in order to process that pulp. We can't afford to wait another 10 or 20 or 30 years until we all decide that, bidets are cool.
Yeah. Well, and again, I think if a bidet works for you, then great, like more power to you. But I actually knew this one girl and she said that she was dealing with parasites and she said that she didn't have a whole house water filter. And so the water that was being sprayed from the bidet was not filtered. And so she thought that that was contributing to her parasite situation.
Absolutely, we've heard that as well. I think that I think again now, with PFAS being in the news a lot over the last couple of years, state legislatures are starting to act and putting more stringent requirements on or lower thresholds on PFAS in municipal water supplies. But it's still only I think it's still a minority of states that are doing that. And so, yeah, like you're shooting water effectively like inside you, to not know what's in that water. It's not just like taking a shower in it. It's definitely several steps more degrees more intimate than that, and definitely something to think about if you're using a bidet.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we have a shower filter, but that's completely different. I don't know anyone that has a toilet filter.
No,
But
no, no. I mean, I think that, I think a lot more people are moving towards the whole house filter when, especially, I mean, like here in Brooklyn, it's difficult to do, but especially in new construction. But again, like all these, there's there's a million great ways to do things when you're starting with a blank slate, but most of us are not, like there's a certain infrastructure in our homes, in our bathrooms, in our shopping, and you have to try to make things better given the options that you have.
right. And a lot of people rent or they live in apartments and they can't get a whole house water filter because it's not really up to them.
Completely.
Okay, so I want to know what is considered, quote, conventional toilet paper? Like, how do we distinguish that?
It's great. It's a really great question. I think the there's no generally accepted definition of conventional toilet paper. That is a term that we have used to refer to toilet paper that is made wholly or almost entirely from virgin trees. That is to say, like with very, very limited recycled pulp content. That's number one. And number two, that has been bleached in some way. Obviously, or maybe not so obviously, toilet paper or tree pulp is not bright white. That like bright sort of Arctic white that most toilet paper is. It has nothing to do with what the actual pulp looks like. So there's different ways of bleaching. But for our purposes, and some better and some worse than others, but for our purposes and in our definition, it's just any toilet paper that's made wholly or almost entirely with virgin trees, and that is bleached.
Okay. Now, I want to know who's behind the big conventional toilet paper brands. I know you had mentioned PG, but like, who else is I feel like there's more of a story of like who's behind it and where is it coming from? I know you mentioned the forest, but like, is it all coming from China? Where is it, like, is it US based? What's the deal?
Yeah. So the biggest brands in the US are Procter and Gamble, Kimberly-Clark, and Georgia Pacific. They account for the majority of toilet paper that's sold in the US, at least for at-home use. There is a pretty sizable percentage of the toilet paper that is bought and sold in the US is made by independents, or it's under independent labels. So like, whether that's Trader Joe's or Costco or, whatever, Gelson's or Kroger have their own toilet paper, or even Whole Foods. Those are obviously not toilet paper companies. Those are just labels, and they contract with independent converters. There's three stages of toilet paper production. There's or four, depending on how you got it. You harvest the wood if you're making wood based. You turn that wood into pulp. You turn that pulp into mother rolls, which are the big, like 2.5 meter wide, 2 meter in diameter rolls. That's mother roll production. And then conversion's the final stage where you are producing the finished product. And so those independent brands are just purchasing product from independent converters. And so to answer your question, the big companies like Georgia Pacific and Kimberly-Clark, they own the whole process, totally vertically integrated, except for the wood harvesting. They're buying fiber, or in some cases, they're buying pulp from companies that do the logging, and it's usually pulped like on site. So in the case of North America, in Canada, with a few exceptions in the southeastern U.S. as well. So they're buying that pulp and then they're turning it into mother reels under their own roof, and then converting it under their own roof. So again, to stay focused on the big companies, they're bringing that pulp in primarily from Canada and from Brazil. The softwood varieties are coming in from Canada, like jack fir and spruce and pine. And then the hardwood is coming from Brazil, and that's primarily eucalyptus. And so the eucalyptus is coming from plantations, which are like highly, highly carbon intensive. A lot of those, we've done a lot of research into what that looks like down there, and it's kind of it's a sad story. In a lot of cases, rainforest, which is originally owned by indigenous tribes, is sold to soybean farming companies. Those soybean farming companies will clear the forest, plant the soybeans, and over the years there will be some infrastructure that is built to reach those areas so that you can bring in the tools and bring out the soybean. Once that infrastructure gets to a certain level, they can move to the next level of kind of extractive um, agriculture, I guess you could say, which is cattle farming. That as the cattle farming develops, you get more roads and more infrastructure. And once that has happened, once you get enough infrastructure there, you switch to the last stage, which is the eucalyptus plantation. And that requires like much more intensive road building and infrastructure. And at that point, there's no trace of the rainforest that used to be there. So it's interesting because the paper industry or the pulp industry, they get to say, well, we didn't cut down any rainforests. Well, no, you didn't. But like you are the final phase of a process that started with cutting down
You're the
rainforests.
reason.
Exactly. So that's, basically there's no toilet paper in America, at least none that I'm aware of. And I'm 99% confident that this is the case, that is, made entirely from American pulp. That doesn't happen. There's always importing either from Canada or from South America. There is, I believe that Georgia Pacific does do some harvesting of pulp from the Southeast, but they're still blending it with pulp that's imported from Brazil. As for all those independent companies that are selling to Trader Joe's or Kirkland, in many cases they are importing mother rolls, believe it or not, from China or from Southeast Asia. But in Southeast Asia, those companies are using pulp that's imported from North America, from Canada, to make the mother rolls. So you've got like a double ocean crossing that's happening before that product ultimately gets finished or converted in the US.
So toilet paper is a worldwide product, literally. um,
Absolutely.
and I think that's why too. I'm sure you remember in 2020 when we had like that lockdown and the toilet paper shortage. That's probably why, because everything was imported from other countries and no one could get toilet paper.
100%, 100%. And it's also why the toilet paper industry is very, has been, I think, lobbying hard with respect to tariffs, the paper industry in general, because they're so dependent upon that hardwood fiber from Brazil, from South America. Like they can't live without it at this point. And so, I think currently there's like a 50% tariff. Don't know for sure if it's gone into effect yet, but that will be really damaging to their margin. So yes, absolutely, it is a completely globalized product, and anybody who kind of says, "Well, I only want to buy a made in America brand," well, that actually doesn't exist. And if you turn your toilet paper package over, look at the bottom, nowhere on it is it going to say, made in America. It might say, some brands will say made in the US with foreign or imported material, which is, true to a degree. But it's not a made in America product.
Right. And I think that's something to pay attention to is it could be, quote, manufactured maybe in America, but the ingredients are sourced globally all over the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah, I think, this is sort of a little further afield from, I think, your focus and mine to some degree as well. But I think there are certain products that are obviously, I think we all support. We all want Americans to have jobs. We all want our economy to prosper, our society to prosper. Um, um, and the more we can be doing here with materials and products that we make ourselves, the better. But I think there are certain products that require raw materials that other parts of the world can produce better, or have they have something that grows there abundantly. I think when it comes to bamboo, um, there is a possibility of cultivating it. You don't even need to cultivate it. In fact, it grows wild, and it grows like a wildfire in North America and in Central America. But it requires a critical mass, sort of as far as the consumer base, in order to warrant building out the infrastructure necessary to do that. So I think on the way there, you have to get the raw materials from wherever you can. In our case, the bamboo is harvested in China because they have had they're sort of blessed with a tremendous bamboo bounty and have been for thousands of years. And to their credit, they've figured out that it's an extraordinary material both for building and for paper production. So my hope is that in the next few years, you will see the construction of the first North American bamboo pulping facility. But these are really big infrastructure projects, a couple of $100 million to build one. But in the meantime, that's not going to happen without the consumer asking for it, without the market existing. That's why there's all these things, whether it's regulation on chemicals or the sort of supply chain infrastructure to make a certain product better. It takes time, and it takes a passionate consumer base to say, hey, this is what we want, and we're willing to fight for it.
Yeah, well, and I think at the end of the day, the consumer just wants a clean product, right? It can be from overseas, but we want a clean product at the end of the day. And so I think that's where more transparency needs to be. And speaking about like bleach, we already know that most toilet paper is bleached, and we talked about formaldehyde. And can you shed light on, there was a study on formaldehyde and vaginitis?
Yeah. So, and I'd love to say something about bleach as well. I know I've sort of touched on it a little bit. But yeah, to start with your question, the study looked at. I mean, it made the point that I think half of women will experience some sort of inflammation, vaginal inflammation. For an extended period at some point in their lives. And it's a huge number. And they think that that's probably actually understated because a lot of women don't actually come forward with the symptoms, and they just kind of suffer silently. And the interesting point is that most of the time, we don't have a clear explanation for why that happens. If you go to see the doctor, by and large, and I'm just, again, reporting on what the study says, I'm not a doctor, but this is, I've read that report backwards and forwards. The doctors will prescribe antifungal creams. They'll treat it as if it's a yeast infection. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And when it doesn't, they don't really have a good solution. Sometimes they'll say, well, change your detergent or change your underwear. But for the most part, they just don't know why it happens. And so women just kind of deal with it. And so these doctors had the hypothesis that it might have to do with either residue from the bleaching process or from formaldehyde. And ultimately, they concluded that it most likely had to do with whatever wet strength additives were used to the toilet paper. And they pointed to formaldehyde. The way they got there was this woman was traveling back and forth from, I think, like her home country to wherever she had immigrated to. And in the home country, they used like a less processed type of the conventional way of doing things there was with a less processed type of pulp. And whenever she went there, the symptoms cleared up. And so they couldn't, or they didn't attempt to identify the precise mechanism of action, but their conclusion was that whatever goes into that processing, it's making some people have this reaction. And it turns out that, formaldehyde sensitivity, formaldehyde contact dermatitis is really common. And so, again, it's not to say that everybody's going to have this response. But it is to say that, a lot of people do and probably don't know it. And also to say that, it's worthwhile for there to be a brand that's offering something else. Like I think the difficulty until we enter the marketplace, at least in the US, it's almost impossible to find a company that wasn't making toilet paper this way. And so it's like, if you know that the option is available and these things are important to you, why not?
Yeah. Well, what are some misconceptions when it comes to natural or non-toxic toilet paper?
Hmm. I think the first is that it's going to be thin and scratchy. I think that's true of so many products. We've kind of been trained, product categories, been trained to think that like if it's natural, it's somehow lesser. Like the eco brand, like if you say that the eco brand, like most people associate that with something that's of a lesser quality. And I think, most people who've used plant paper would say, well, I don't think of it that way at all. It's not an eco brand. It's just a better brand. I like the way it works. I like the way it feels. Even if it weren't environmentally, superior or more environmentally sound, I'd still want to use it. And I think that, in a lot of cases, those ingredients, questionable ingredients, those manufacturing shortcuts that big companies take, whether it's in toilet paper or cosmetics or food production, agriculture, anything else, it's not because it makes the product better, or it's not because there's no alternative to make the product, perform in the same way, but rather it's because it's the cheapest way to do it. We see this with food additives all the time. There's lots of other ways to achieve these different colors, achieve these different flavor profiles, but they're a little bit more expensive. And sometimes, yeah, obviously, we're all looking for the best prices we can get on things. But sometimes it's a really small increase. Like we're talking about a very minimal price difference. And I think, our sense is that a lot of customers actually are willing to pay a couple of cents more for a product that they can trust, a product that's been made without compromise.
Well, I'll tell you, before I bought plant paper, for those that don't know, that's why I was a consumer before I even invited you on. And I was like, I really like this product. I have to invite the founder on. But I was a little hesitant because I was like, okay, it's going to be rough. It's going to be a little scratchy and rough, but it's not at all. My husband can attest as well. And he's like, I love this. And my backside has never been cleaner. So,
Oh, that's the best. That's the best thing ever. Husbands are often tough judges. I will say, like when we are fortunately, we hear this a lot. Like I was nervous to see what my husband would say. Because I think, I don't know why this is, but men are just kind of like, I don't know, very attached to whatever their white, soft, fluffy toilet paper is.
they're
And it's
critics.
often,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's often the woman of the household who's like, try this other thing. This sounds like it sounds like it might be better. And then again, fortunately, we hear often from women like, I was shocked, but my husband actually loves this, and now he doesn't want to buy anything else, and he even brings it with him to work, or he puts it in his suitcase when he travels, and we're like, okay, then we did what we came here to do.
You
If
know
we
you're
pass the
doing
husband
something.
test,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Well, and then to bring up the whole cost and being more expensive, it is a little bit more expensive, I will admit, but when you kind of do the math, I want to say it's only like $20 more per year, like when you're adding it.
yeah, exactly. I think we offer different pack sizes, and if you have the storage space, which I personally don't, but a lot of people out there do have a garage or something, you can basically get it to parity with any of the big toilet paper brands that you would buy in a grocery store. So if you buy that bigger pack size, that helps us keep our costs down and keep the price down. But even without that, yeah, you can get it to just a couple bucks a month increase, which is obviously these days like the
Skip two
price of
cups
a
of coffee.
cup.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I think in the end, something that you asked why we got into this product. I think something that was exciting for us was to be able to offer a product that was, at least in our minds, really superior in every way, like a vastly better product. That if you, by analogy, if you were to make that same type of leap in a car, you'd be going from like a $20,000 car to a $80,000 car, which obviously most people are not in a position to do. But instead of a $60,000 delta, we're talking about a couple bucks a month, something that is accessible to, not everyone, to be sure, but to a much bigger percentage of the population than, could make that the equivalent switch in some other product category. So the idea of being able to offer something really premium, but without something that you're going to have to change your whole lifestyle for, that was exciting to us, to make that accessible to people.
Yeah, I think that's a big misconception, is that it's going to cost a lot more. And I think another misconception, correct me if I'm wrong, but people may think that, oh, well, it doesn't flush. It's not septic safe.
Yeah, definitely a misconception. There's a kind of gold standard septic safety test where you take 10 sheets of toilet paper and you put it in a ball jar, like a quart ball jar, not the little pint, but one size bigger. Fill it up with water, shake it for 10 seconds. And if the thing basically breaks down completely, you should be good to go in most plumbing systems, in most septic systems. And if you do that with plant paper and compare it to some of the other leading brands, it actually breaks down more thoroughly, more quickly. Some of the other ones, shockingly, kind of like retain their shape completely, and you're like, this just doesn't look good for my plumbing.
I have heard that a lot of plumbers are discouraging people from using the brand Charmin in particular. Have you heard of that?
I haven't. I don't want to say that I've heard that in particular about Charmin, but certainly some of the the sort of like fluffier tree-based brands, the sort of premium, definitely have a lot of issues. One call out is that I think a lot of people blame toilet paper for their plumbing issues. I'm saying this in full transparency, recognizing that, I may be seemingly letting our, friends at Charmin off the hook. And that's not my intention. It's more that, generally speaking, when you have a clog in your plumbing, it's not the toilet paper that caused the clog. It's the pipes corrode over time. They narrow over time. They get a belly over time. And then, at a certain point, it's like an artery clogging. Like, it's not the one, thing that you ate that day that gave you the heart attack. It's a lifetime of, the accumulation of things. So, I think that it's important to know, with whatever toilet paper you choose, do you have is your plumbing system particularly old, particularly sensitive? If it is particularly old or sensitive, then there are brands that are like, you may have no choice but to go with like an ultra thin 1-ply toilet paper. But for most people, in most homes, plant paper is going to do, as well or better than any other brand that's out there.
Okay, yeah, that's good to know. It's good to point out. Okay, Lee, well, where can people find you on social media, or if they want to try plant paper, where can they go?
So we're at plantpaper.us, is our website. Super easy to order there. And, one thing to call out is that we have offer a subscription program, which I think, I personally don't use a lot of subscriptions in my life. I think, a lot of us have had bad experiences with them, and we're mindful of that. I think we've worked really, really hard to make that subscription management experience like easier and better than any other that's out there. And we get that feedback from people all the time. Obviously, it's really nice to not have to worry about running out of toilet paper. It shows up when you need it. You can control it by text if you want to push it back or push it up or pause it or whatever. So all of that is very self-explanatory on the website. And then we're at plant_paper is our Instagram account. And we have a lot of fun on there, and try to create some interesting content. As we said before, this is one of those topics
I bet you can like share.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I bet you share some funny memes. This is just a taboo topic.
Definitely. I mean, we've been fortunate to have some funny, interesting, and recognizable faces, willing to talk about toilet paper and their toilet paper use. And so you can find all that stuff on our Instagram account.
Okay, well, I'll be sure to put your website and your Instagram account in today's show notes so that for everyone listening, you can just go to today's show notes and find them with one easy tap. Thank you so much, Lee, for your time and sharing about your company and for creating such a clean product for everyone to be able to use and access.
Thank you, Bethany. Well, I really appreciate, your, first of all, taking a chance on plant paper and becoming a customer yourself. And second of all, for inviting me on. I really enjoyed it.
Are you ready to rock middle age? I'm Dr. Tina Moore, Gen X truth teller and holistic physician. On the Dr. Tina Show, one of Apple Podcast's top alternative health shows, I share what actually works for metabolic health, hormones, and strength, backed by decades of clinical results, not trends. From loving the gym and hitting your protein goals to peptides and microdosing GLP-1s, it's all done the right way, not the hype way. Because menopause doesn't have to suck if you're fit. New episodes every Thursday, produced by Drake Peterson and Wellness Loud.
And thank you for all the great work that you do. We're huge fans here at Plant Paper and in our household.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Digest This. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review in your podcast app to let us know. If you're ever wondering how you can support me and this podcast, sharing it with your friends and family is the best way. This is a Wellness Loud production produced by Drake Peterson and edited by Mike Fry. To check out more shows by my team, go to wellnessloud.com, and to email the show, message us at digestthispod@gmail.com. See you next time. The content of this show is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not a substitute for individual medical and mental health advice and does not constitute a provider-patient relationship. As always, talk to your doctor or health team first.